The Rebel Capitalist Show.
You know, I was reading Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson again.
Yes, I've read it 4 times, and that's not enough.
yeah. But you know, he talks about the fallacy of overlooking secondary consequences.
Yes.
And
Big government people always overlook secondary consequences.
Well, I think a lot of people in the general public are doing that as well, as far as that.
Well, we were mostly educated by the public schools, so what do you expect?
Yeah, exactly. So, but before we get there, what about drinking and driving? How is that constitutionally legal? Should we have it? Should we not have it? What is your view on that?
My view is it's none of the government's business what the content of my blood is, and they have absolutely no right to stop me and stick a needle in my blood or make me blow into a machine. If I cause an accident, that's either a crime or a tort, depending upon whether I was simply negligent or criminally negligent. But short of that, it's none of the government's business.
Great. Okay. Wanted to get your opinion on that really quick. So now let's move on. We just recently had we're reminded, I guess is a good way to say it, of not what happened on 9/11. And I think that's a great illustration of why we should be so concerned with the overreach that we've seen in 2020 and in 2021. Can you go through just not 9/11, but what happened as a result, the Patriot Act, and then how that led to the NSA, how that leads to the TSA, how that leads to FATCA, and how that's restricted our freedoms, and how that's boiled the frog slowly and got us to a point where we're even more receptive to the lockdowns and giving the government the ability to close down businesses and not allow you to walk on the beach that we saw in 2020. And therefore we have to look at, okay, what is the potential that we see even more government restriction as a result of what we're doing today that was made possible, I guess, by the Patriot Act.
Okay. Before we get there, as to 9/11, a friend of mine, Barbara Olson, who's the wife or was the wife of Ted Olson, conservative Republican libertarian Solicitor General of the United States, who understands the Constitution similarly to you and me, was killed in the second plane in New York. If she had been allowed to carry a gun, if Todd Beamer, who led the revolt in the plane that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, had been allowed to carry a gun,
right,
9/11 might not have happened the way we know it, because the government emasculates us and protects us from defending ourselves. Not what you asked me, but as a prelude. What you asked me is to explain how 9/11 has become the war against drugs all over again for our civil liberties.
And the war against our privacy. Yeah.
Correct. The war against drugs radically weakened the Fourth Amendment and caused state legislatures and state and federal judges to find all kinds of creative and inventive and ingenious and nefarious ways around the Fourth Amendment warrant requirement, which basically allows police to search and seize without a warrant and even without probable cause. 9/11 has done the same thing. The Patriot Act, which was posted on the House intranet, that's the internal internet, for 15 minutes before House members could vote on it. It's 315 pages long. You're speaking with probably one of the few people in the country who's read it twice. It takes about 40 or 50 hours to read because it basically amends dozens and dozens of other pre-existing laws. So you have to read the pre-existing law as well as the amendment in order to understand what it did. But the Patriot Act basically allows one FBI agent to write a search warrant for another FBI agent. It bypasses the requirement of the Fourth Amendment. That, of course, is unconstitutional since Congress is subject to the Constitution like everybody else does. The Fourth Amendment, the Patriot Act began the evisceration of the Fourth Amendment. George W. Bush took the position that because the NSA is in the military and because he was the commander in chief of the military, he could order them to do whatever he wanted, and they weren't subject to the Constitution. That, of course, is absurd, because all government is subject to the Constitution in the United States. The Constitution itself says it is the supreme law of the land. So he permitted the NSA to establish an apparatus using their 60,000, mainly civilian, but under the leadership of military employees, to capture every keystroke, whether we delete it and hit send or not, every phone call and every landline and every mobile device, every piece of data transmitted on a fiber optic cable, again, without a search warrant. So privacy is totally gone. If the government wants it, they don't look at this in real time because they don't have the person power to do it. But if they wanted to, they could look at your financial records, your medical records, your legal records. ObamaCare requires primary care physicians to use laptops that are connected to the Department of Health and Human Services, so they can look at whatever your physician is putting into her or his laptop about what you're telling her or him about what's the cause of the headache that you have. So it has utterly destroyed privacy, utterly destroyed the Fourth Amendment. The Patriot Act even went so far as to make it a crime, a felony, for the recipient of an FBI written search warrant to tell anybody. So the FBI knocks at my door. I'm a librarian in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I'm 86 years old. I'm hard of hearing. This is a true story. She says to him, "Sonny, what do you want?" This 27-year-old FBI agent hands her a warrant to look at who has been taking out books. It's a public library. It's a government library. How can it be a crime to take a book from a government library? Nevertheless, the FBI is interested in this. She takes the self-written search warrant, or the agent-written search warrant from him, hands it to her 75-year-old assistant. She's arrested for sharing, in violation of the Patriot Act, the agent-written warrant with a friend. Fast forward 3 years, a federal judge says to the prosecutors, "You really going to prosecute this woman? She's now 89 years old." "Yes, we are." "Okay, I'm about to declare the Patriot Act unconstitutional. Are you still going to prosecute her?" Give us a few hours to call John Ashcroft, the Attorney General. They come back in the courtroom. They withdraw the indictment. This courageous judge declares that section of the Patriot Act unconstitutional anyway. So that part of it, which prohibited the recipient from telling anyone, a lawyer, a lover on the pillow, a priest in confessional, a judge in an open court, it was a crime to tell anyone that you had received one of these so-called national security letters, a euphemism for one FBI agent has authorized another one. That part has been declared unconstitutional, and the feds did not appeal that. So they don't use it anymore. But that's an example of how far and how deep and how fanatical the Republicans and some Democrats, but mainly Republicans, under George W. Bush in the weeks and months following 9/11 went to destroy our liberty. Because it's this perverse view, George, that if the government is destroying our liberty, it must be keeping us safe.
Right.
It presumes that the trade of give you liberty to keep me safe actually works. Well, A, it doesn't work. B, I can keep myself safe if you let me own my guns. And C, I am born with my liberty. It doesn't come from you, federal government.
Yeah, exactly right. And I
I've made these arguments so many times, but I'm so passionate about it because it's all going in one direction. Jefferson predicted before he died, in the long run, if we don't have a revolution, it didn't necessarily mean bloody, every generation, government will grow and liberty will shrink.
That's right. Yeah,
Welcome to the long run.
I'm so glad you went into a deep dive on the Patriot Act there, because I think a lot of my viewers, listeners are concerned that we may have a social score type credit system in the United States like we're seeing in China. And I just want to point out to those people that by allowing the government to do what they're doing in 2020 and 21, you are increasing the probabilities that that comes to fruition. And that
Look,
meaning that social credit score, just like the Patriot Act,
yeah.
increases the probabilities that we one day, maybe in the near future, see that social credit score. So,
The other day I had to have a young man that does digital work for me order me a new piece of hardware. He was in New York City and I was out at my farm, which is where I am now. And Amex declined the card. What the heck is this? I called them up and they said, well, Judge Napolitano, this person making the phone call was in New York City and your card was in Northwest New Jersey. How do you know where the card is?
yeah.
Well, your card has a computer chip in it. So if I press a code on my computer, it tells you where the card is. But don't worry, we're not the government. Don't worry, you're not the government. The government has access to our conversation now and to your computer records, American Express. So what you learn about me, the government has about me.
Yeah.
Where is that in the Constitution? Where did we ever debate and vote to give the government the power to do that?
Right. Right.
Anyway,
Sure.
they accepted the transaction after we had this conversation. I was able to buy the iPhone, but every time I take out that card and look at it, I go, all right, Amex, you know exactly where I am.
Yeah.
You have to have a sense of humor. This stuff is dreadful, but you have to have a sense of humor or you'll lose your mind.
Yeah, you can either laugh or cry. But
Right.
The one thing that I'm trying to do, and I want to encourage, and I know you're doing, and our good friend Gerald Salente is doing as well, and I want to encourage everyone listening to do, is stand up and fight for freedom.
Yes.
And I do not condone violence, but that doesn't mean that we cannot stand up and fight for personal liberty.